But what I feel like is you're starting to give us some really important insights on how you make this company change. What are some other things that you could share with other HR professionals that are on the podcast? Your insights into making the change, because there's always challenge. There's never that change is going to be super easy. Just roll it out. Give us some of the insider tips, the insights that you have to make these kind of changes.
One of the things, especially when you're going through like an acquisition merger sort of thing, is people miss the old ways. They talk about that on the old ways of doing things. And they'll bring up the fact of this is how we used to do it and how we used to do things. And I recently have had to talk about is there is no used to do it because we're California dairies. And this is how California Dairies has done it. You are a California Dairies employee. Your paycheck says California Dairies. You're under California Dairies off of things. We have Challenge as a brand, but we're California Dairies. So California Dairies has always done something this way. There hasn't been a change. You're under a new company now. Let's talk about how that change is for you and what we need to do if we need to make some changes. I've gone through to the HR teams and the CHRO, and I've made some comments about certain things that probably should be changed and they have been changed, which is very nice because it was something that wasn't brought up before. Because when you bring in 200 new employees into an organization who have their own way of doing stuff, you have to look at things differently and say, what does the business need to do? And we are in a state right now of moving over into a new way of doing business, a new way of recognizing things and not operating in silos and working as a full leadership group off of things. So this has made a big difference as well that we can speak about these things where we saw problems before, problems that might come up, and we can interact with each other and try to problem solve.
It's interesting because when you talk about the subject of change, it brings up emotions that aren't always good. People are afraid of change. There's comfort in the way that it used to be. But the topic of this is don't fall back into the same old culture. That would probably be the easiest thing to do. But we live in a world that is complex and always changing.
Absolutely. The only constant is change. So it's always there. It's always going to be it. And yes, people are afraid of change because they don't know what it's going to bring. The important part then is to make sure people know what you're trying to achieve with the change. It's not change for change sake, that there is a reason for the change. There is something we're trying to achieve, whether it is operational, procedural things, because maybe something wasn't quite correct in the past that we were doing. So we need to correct that. Or if it's something that's going to make us better in the long run, it's going to be painful in the short time. You have to recognize that too and say, this is going to be a painful change. It's going to be a lot of work in a short period of time, but this is the outcome. This is the other side that we're trying to get to so that people know you're thinking about it. It's not just the flavor of the day and the passion project of the week kind of a thing. It is there for a reason and what we're trying to achieve.
And one of the things that's come up a number of times that nobody can argue about is if that change is in support of our customer. They're the highest authority in our business. Any change that we do has to be through that lens of we're doing this because we're here to support our customers. And people can't argue with that. They can, but you tend to not if you're like, oh, no, I see that. That's the right thing to do for the customer. It's the right thing for us to do.
And that can get complex for people, especially an organization like ours, where the customer is, people get confused on who the customer is and the consumer. So you have to well define that out for people. Who are we here to serve ultimately? What are we trying to achieve as an organization? What is our mission? What are our values? And point back to that. What are we trying to do? And to your point, the change has to ultimately be a better service to the customer. But who is that customer? And everybody has to understand that, especially when you get larger organizations, you get over 1,000 employees, and I've been at the 100,000 plus at the Kmart. People at the consumer facing side of things don't often understand who the actual customer is and what the actual purpose of the company is. They just apply because they like the brand, they like the product, they like certain things. So you have to educate them as to why we exist in the first place and what we're trying to achieve. And that is also part of HR. And that's in the communications that we do on orientations, onboardings, handbooks, whatever we do as far as employee recognition or community outreach, and just tying it all back to this is who we are and what we're trying to do for the customer ultimately.